Okay, so finally we're going to talk about Sita. So I said that this could be a version of union or reunion with the goddess, but it's a little bit of a complicated one since, after all, Rama has already met this goddess, and as we're going to see, it's both a positive and a sort of weirdly negative interaction. So here's Sita. She's the wife of Rama. Her name sort of connects to an idea of a wife's loyalty to her husband and the social duty of a wife. Um, and remember that Rama is very motivated by duty as well. He has his dharma, which is his duty to the social sphere. Kings have their duty to be kings, and people have a duty to be obedient to the leaders of their society, and Rama shows both these things. So it's not surprising that Sita would have a story about her duty as well. But it's a little bit strange because basically what happens is that as soon as Rama rescues her, he starts berating her, and he starts basically accusing her of having slept with Ravana, having been seduced with Ravana. He says, "You say you're pure, but I don't believe you. I believe that you have slept with the monster." And so there's this big fight, and Rama says, "You've dishonored me, and I don't want to be around you because you've dishonored me." And it's super wild and weird. And Sita says, "What the heck is going on with you? I, of course, have been loyal to you." So there's this whole sort of weird doubt around her, which is very negative and also completely unfair because she didn't do anything wrong. And it sort of shows that one of the ways women are thought of is in these negative ways, at least in the thought of in these negative ways, and this fear that women are going to be seduced by someone other than their husbands. That's just such a big sort of cultural fear and cultural norm. But what happens is, well, actually, there's a few different versions, and it depends on your take on the story. But the sort of primary version, the one that we have in our traditional texts, is that Sita, Shiva is a different god. Sita passes a test. So Rama says basically, step into this fire, and if you've been loyal to me, you'll be preserved. And if you aren't loyal to me, you'll be burned up in the fire. Which also sounds very unfair. It kind of reminds me of the trials that they used to use for witches, right? Like if she sinks, she's innocent, but she's also dead. If she, well, it's not quite the same thing because it's the opposite. But if she survives the fire, then she's loyal to Rama, but she has every chance of dying too for no reason. So in order to pass this test, you literally have to do something impossible. But the good news is that Sita gets help from Agni, who is the god of fire. So the god of fire says she has been loyal enough to you, Rama. Just accept that and believe it. And so then, it's all worked out. Rama's like, "Oh, okay, I believe you now," and they live happily ever after. That has struck a lot of people as kind of weird. I think it actually makes a lot of sense in the cultural context in which the story is being told. If the wife's loyalty is on the line, that's the fear, and so that's the way people tell the story. But it's very completely unfair to poor Sita, I think, and it shows sort of the intense negativity that could come out of nowhere from theoretically loyal men, about about women's loyalty and the way that things are set up to be kind of unfair to women. And a lot of people have wanted to tell a different story about it. In fact, there's another version, and the alternate version is that basically Sita just up and leaves Rama because he's being a jerk to her. The story about Sita is that she is a daughter of some kind of goddess of the earth. And when Rama starts accusing her falsely and berating her, she just says, "You know what? You don't deserve me." And she just goes back home to live with her Earth mother. The Earth swallows her up and she just disappears into the ground. Uh, so yeah, so it seems like people felt like there was something weird about this story. And in other versions of the story, there's all this stuff about like maybe Rama thought he saw a duplicate of Sita sleeping with Ravana, but it was just an illusion. There's all this sort of weird illusion qualities around all this, and it's sort of ambiguities and confusions. Um, and in the version where Sita goes back home, in some versions of the story, Rama kills himself because he has dishonored her. And that's a pretty sad ending. And it doesn't really fit with the heroic version. It doesn't really seem like a heroic story. But it does mean that they're both in the afterlife and they can just be the gods, Lakshmi and Vishnu together. And so maybe that is a happy ending if one's dead and the other is in the earth. Um, but that's not the traditional story. But you can see that people had some problems with this. This has also been the subject of a weird, sort of interesting little movie called Sita Sings the Blues, which was made by a Western woman about sort of the story of the Ramayana. Kind of controversial because it's a Western take on things, and so the more conservative Hindu folks aren't too fond of it. But it is kind of exploring that question of like the sexism in this whole story. Okay, but in the standard version of this story, Rama goes back home. And he returns, he crosses the return threshold. He goes back and he gets to be part of the kingdom again. He gets to be king, in fact. So he becomes the master of two worlds. He has gone on the adventure. He's had this journey in the forest. He has made his own marriage stronger, at least in some versions of the story, by sort of being tested. But now they've proven that they're loyal to each other, maybe, depending on if you want to think of it that way. But ultimately, Rama becomes king. And it's interesting because in so many other versions of the hero's journey, we've said that the hero had to learn a lesson, the hero had to grow and change. But the impression I get in the Ramayana is that Rama doesn't really grow and change, at least not in most versions of the story. It's more that he was already perfect, but he had to go and prove that he was perfect. It was more that, society wasn't ready for him. And so he had to wait until it was, and then he was able to be this king and this leader for society. And it's more that he had to prove himself in the wilderness rather than he had to change on any fundamental level. But maybe you want to read the interaction between him and Sita as a kind of change, that he realizes he made a mistake there. It's hard to say. But that means sort of the union with the goddess is both positive and negative. She is being viewed as the goddess who is all good and great and wonderful and perfect, but she's also being viewed negatively as the temptress, as the evil woman who's going to sleep around and things like that. Oh no, we couldn't have that. As you can see, I'm being a little mocking here. But yeah, it shows, it's one of those stories that kind of combines the positive and negative views of women. And so for Joseph Campbell, that's the goddess as healing and salvation, the end of your journey, but also simultaneously the goddess as temptress, something to be feared, something to be avoided. Jung would probably say the positive and negative versions of the anima, the sort of good god, lovely goddess versus the wicked witch goddess. It's all there, and it's kind of all playing around Sita here. Okay, but ultimately Rama becomes king. He becomes the master of two worlds, and they all live happily ever after. And that's the standard version. But as you can see, it gets a little bit more complicated when you look outside the standard version. But I think we could see this overall as a sort of very classic hero story with some complexities there. Now, when we look at more hero stories, not every story has to involve literally going home. It can more be sort of metaphorically going home. But for Rama, I think it is more literal. So we see that pattern there, as we kind of saw with Gilgamesh, that returning home often does mean that you've learned something on your journey. But it can be the end of any kind of close of a cycle. At the end of sort of the whole journey, whatever that meant, this period of growth or change or even just dealing with problems. When that comes to the end, that's when you return home. And I think Rama's master of the two worlds, not so much because he's really that different of a person, but because he has shown that he can be both the king and the one who's suffering in the forest, both the leader and the one who fights monsters. He can do all those different things. And I guess if he's gained something, he's gained Hanuman. He's gained this loyal friend too. So maybe we want to think of Hanuman as a kind of elixir. I don't know. But in the end, it does seem like Rama is an even better king than he would have already been. That's my thinking on it anyway. I would love to hear your thoughts. So I will see you guys in the comment section for that discussion. Catch you later.